Hi guys, I'm Steve with CSI Works, and today I'm talking about payment processors, acquirers, and the current competitive landscape in the United States in this particular fintech industry. So I've separated, the old world with agents against the new world, no agents, and I think this is the major trend that everybody needs to be paying attention to, because I think this is where the real battle is taking place. Because what you see on the old world is happening. There's a lot of consolidation. I was really hard pressed to come up with 10 companies, and as you can see, Fiserv buys First Data bought Clover. Bank of America works under white label solution of Fiserv. So does Wells Fargo. uh, FIS acquires WorldPay. WorldPay acquires TSYS. Now FIS is thinking of spinning off WorldPay, but not yet. Global Payments, Elavon. Elavon is owned by US Bank. PaySafe has a little tiny market share. So, and there's more, right? So these are the big players. These are the top of the crop. And when I say that they are the old world, that these are the companies that processed payments arguably before internet, right? With the sliding cards, devices, and other ways. First Data, JP Morgan Chase, because of the way that they have the structure, they own most of the market share. FIS, WorldPay, and TSYS in that configuration is pretty much the third contender, to be the top three companies there. And then all the other guys are sharing a very small market share there. And I think that consolidation is mainly happening to withstand this side of the market, which is rapidly being taken over by the internet companies, by the tech companies, which are saying no thank you to agents, right? So the agents are losing that market, not just to this competitor or to this processor. They're just losing their merchants altogether. And I'm going to talk a little bit about how agents structure their relationships with the processors and with the merchants. But in this context, I'm kind of focusing on the fact that the consolidation that's happening on the payment processor side in the old world, I think, is a reaction to compete adequately with the new world, right? PayPal, the company that sort of spun itself up because there was eBay, there was a need for processing those transactions. And, Elon Musk actually played a role in PayPal, if you didn't know that. Square is also had, innovative approach to payment processing. They took advantage of the aux cable or the plug and quite that and made a mobile device, a payment processing device. Stripe is a company that's heavily favored in Silicon Valley for pretty much any startup that's financed by the tech. And so they do play a huge role, right? Apple Pay, Google Pay, Samsung Pay, Amazon Pay, all of those guys are cutting in to this market here. And all of it would have been fine, but because the agents are cut out, there's the sense of, what's going to happen? How are we going to handle this? And I think the reactions, while the processors are consolidating and buying each other to, have a bigger, stronger front, agents, to a certain extent, are doing the same thing. But more importantly, they're beginning to focus on the software companies as CSI Works, right? Where we continue to value the services that agents provide by maintaining the relationship with their merchants and providing the valuable solutions to that merchant community. There's definitely value in that from the eyes of the software developers. And, this right here is a representation of the current landscape. And we as a company try to focus on this side of the world. Even though we are tech and startup, we're not Silicon funded and we're not venture funded. And so because of this, this is our path right here. Fiserv, like I mentioned, is the company that provided technology to banks in general, and they bought First Data for, I think, like $20+ billion in all-stock deal. FIS, WorldPay, and TSYS were three separate companies that also were all bought together. Fun fact, FIS is the processor for the government on the EBT side. So because like an EBT payment type is a government program, and so FIS is a processor on that side of things. Another fun fact, that when Amazon was starting, I don't believe that this is the case anymore today, but Amazon was getting started, and for the longest time they processed transactions in a semi integrated way, basically, where they also were sort of kind of like an acquirer, but the transactions were actually processed by Paymentech, which is owned by JP Morgan Chase. JP Morgan Chase surprisingly represents a pretty big market share. I did not realize. So based on my data, almost 35% in 2022. Big chunk. Fiserv, I think actually represents higher if you take into account what Bank of America and Wells Fargo brings to the table. But if those two companies are counted separately, which I don't think they should be, because they're leveraging that same technology anyway. So I'm sure that Fiserv has a cut from whatever. But again, they're represented as processors within their own right. And so Fiserv together would actually be bigger processor than JP Morgan Chase. Otherwise, they're in a number 2 position. And FIS, WorldPay, and TSYS is also number 3 position today, but well, I think their number 3 position will solidify even more because they're planning on spinning off WorldPay. I think that's pretty definite now. It's going to private equity firms. Elavon Bank, US Bank actually just recently acquired Union Bank, and so they're growing their bank footprint, and they already were processing for Union Bank, Elavon. So that just kind of grows their footprint a little bit, but still they're not in a top 3 position, maybe 4th. I would say solid 4th position. And then there's PaySafe. All right, so that's basically the landscape for the processing companies that utilize agents. And so let's talk a little bit about agents, right? You have an agent who will contract or have a deal with all of these and then some, right? And so most of these companies will be agnostic to hardware or software. In other words, they have APIs, they have SDKs, they have some of their hardwares, they have basically a portfolio and arsenal of ways for you to bring the payment to the payment and then let them process it. If you're a developer, you can basically work with them and let them process. If you are agent, you can contract with them and sell them as a processor and get recurring income. That recurring income is your portfolio. It's an asset that is itself liquid and transferable. You can sell it for multiples of its worth in the market, in our market, in the fintech market. So generally what you will find is that an agent will have a contract with JP Morgan Chase, Fiserv, FIS, WorldPay, TSYS, Global Payments, Elavon, and PaySafe. And they will establish a solid relationship with the merchant. And if merchant says, I want Clover, agent says, all right, that's fine. That's First Data. We can put you on this plan. If then that agent comes back and merchant comes back and says, I don't like Clover anymore, I want something else, they'll give them anything else that they want and just keep the processing within the portfolio of contracts that they have. That way they can always service their merchant with whatever the merchant wants and continue to cash flow that relationship. And that's the landscape. Am I right or am I wrong?